Right before you, you have a traditional depiction of a Polish Easter blessing basket filled with written eggs or pisanki. This is the artwork of our next egg writer, Miss Barbara Pani Basia, we'll say, okay? Pani Basia Strzemka, who is, when it comes to Western New York egg writers, if not a little bit even further, is an artist extraordinaire, because she takes from pisanki to porcelain and from porcelain back. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you, Father.
And what are you working on there at this moment?
I'm working on my little pisanka with my electric stylus because this is what I'm used to using. And I'm doing a design which I formulated myself. And what I'm doing is putting the wax on prior to we put it in the first bath. I'm working with hot beeswax in this electric stylus.
So in other words, whatever you're writing now will remain white.
This will exactly, whatever is underneath the wax will remain white. It's a batik process, and in order to increase the colors on the egg, each time you wax it, you then dip it into succeeding color, and you produce a multicolor pisanka.
You can see how through the centuries the art has really developed here, even into the electric pisak there. Where did you pick up this art?
I originally started doing the pisanki with the pinhead because that's what Grandma taught us. And Grandma originally came from Dobromil, which is now in the Ukraine. Then she moved to Nowy Sącz, and when she came to United States, this is what she taught me. We started doing the pisanki on Holy Saturday. We had to wait for Babcia to come home from work. My mother had the eggs already hard cooked, and we started decorating the eggs, and it was a very dangerous process because my aunt, I, and Grandma, 3 generations, were doing eggs. And all we had was, it was a very crude thing, we had a cut-off carnation milk can filled with some beeswax, and it was on an open gas jet on a stove, and 3 of us were dipping in with pins, and sometimes the wax can fell over, and we had to pick it up with pliers so we didn't have a blaze in the house. So that's how we made pisanki. When I went to college, I had a Ukrainian girlfriend, and she introduced me to their style. I was fascinated by the linear style, so I went on Fillmore Avenue and I bought a kit, and I taught myself how to use the kiska that you were using, or the manual stylus. But of course, it's time consuming, and I decided I wanted to invest in the electric stylus. The more I used it, the more I liked it, and then I invested in another stylus which has changeable points. So I can have it from ultra fine to very wide, depending on what kind of lines I want to make or how much surface I want to cover. Now, when you work on an egg like this, you do your initial design, and then I put it in a vinegar bath usually. I have a vinegar bath made of 1-to-4 ratio vinegar and water. I put it in for approximately 2.5 minutes. Cleans off any body oil that may have been on the egg, and then I stick it into my first color. So we're going to, generally you work from light to dark. And you have to think of your color sequences too, because sometimes when you mix colors, you wind up with mud. So we're going to, I did the vinegar bath prior to this, so now we just stick it in the yellow dye, and you let it sit there for a little while. When the egg will come out, the egg shell will be yellow, but whatever's underneath the beeswax will be white. Now, for the sake of expediency, I prepared the same design at home, and this is the same egg. I dipped it into green at home, and what I want to do here is just, I'm going to put my initial on the bottom, and then, for the sake of expediency, I'll show you what's next. So I would simply put my initial on here. Wherever I put my initial on, the egg stays green. I've also waxed already the green leaves that are on this egg, so now I can safely dip it into the next color. I did a little cheating at home, however, because you wanted something more prepared, I also dipped it in light blue. I waxed the flower in the center with wax. I'm going to have a blue flower now. And if I just finish filling in 3 petals here, we are going to stick it into a dark red dye, and hopefully it's going to look sort of purplish. Being a former art teacher, I know my color theory, and I also know how these aniline dyes work
And
when
as
you
said,
dip
you're
from
working
one to the other.
Right, the lighter to the darker ones.
Right.
Or sometimes interchanging, like, what is under this blue?
What is under this blue is light green.
Light green.
There's also a way to cheat, Father. I've got some Canadian books, and I also learned how to use the rinse. When I do my egg dyes, I have 2 oranges. One is strictly for dipping the eggs, and one is for what we call rinsing.
Right, orange will take off
The
some
orange
of the
will
colors
take all this
underneath.
color off, and I can safely go into orange or yellow again. It won't be the same as it is from that, but it will be yellow or orange. Okay, now this one, which is all finished and already has my initials on it, goes into dark red. And you have to be careful so you don't bounce it into the liquid. The one that's already in the dye, the egg is turning pale yellow, but the longer you leave it in the dye, the more brilliant the yellow will become. So I generally would leave it in for at least 5 minutes. The one that's already in the dye, the blue is changing color, and you can see what happened already. It's like a burgundy color right now, which is quite nice.
And under that green,
Under this burgundy color, when we take the wax off, you will see white, green, blue, and the burgundy color. My grandma was originally from what is now the Ukraine, but of course when I started doing Easter eggs, I cannot do these intricate patterns. I'm not Ukrainian. So I fall back on traditional Polish patterns, which I get from different sources, postcards, embroidery, books. I make up my own based on what I'm influenced by, and I try to make my designs Polish.
and most of those are floral designs
And
as
most
well.
of them are florals because I tend to do that. I love to do things that are lacy, delicate, intricate, rather than the very simple coarse eggs that Babcia used to do. You know, Babcia came home from work tired. She wanted to do the
Holy
eggs as fast
Saturday.
as possible. Holy Saturday. She was a cleaning lady downtown, so she came home at 4 o'clock. She wanted to get this over with so she could sit down and relax. So I'm working with the pin, my aunt is working with the pin, and Grandma puts a nail in her pencil because she makes bigger dots, bigger
cover the
teardrops,
air.
and she finishes faster. All right, so now we're going to take the egg out of the red dye.
And that's a dark red. Ooh, that's a
dark
beautiful color. Against that blue, I can't imagine. Wow.
Wait till the wax comes off, and the blue is brilliant, the green is light green, and there's white on the egg. This is the fun part, taking the wax off, because the egg comes to life. The design is suddenly resurrected from the darkness of this.
Yeah, there was an older lady who used to write eggs in Detroit, and she called this the resurrection phase, because you apply, as we're going to do, the light, the heat, again, to the side of the egg, and gradually melt off all the dirt of winter and all the dirt of our weaknesses and everything, and this beautiful transformation takes part, which is the resurrection.
I do all my eggs manually. Some people heat them in the oven, they let it heat, and then they take a rag and they wipe the wax off while the eggs are still warm. Mine are little creations, they're all done individually, so what I do is hold the egg close to the side of the flame. You don't put it in the flame, and you certainly don't hold it above the flame or you will charcoal the egg. So I just hold it right next to the flame. And I'm looking at the egg itself, and the wax is starting to liquefy, so I give it a quick wipe. I'm using Kleenex. My favorite wiper happens to be a puff tissue because it's the softest one on the market. So when the wax starts to liquefy, it looks shiny as it melts, I give it a quick wipe. I only wipe in one direction because if you keep rubbing back and forth, you're not doing anything. The wax solidifies as soon as I take it away from the flame. When I taught this for an enrichment class for children, I had 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. The little kids, when they took their tissues, they kept rubbing back and forth. And I said, no, you don't do that because the wax is, you're just polishing and rubbing the hard wax around.
But you want to catch it when it's still liquefied.
When it's just about rolling down the egg. Oh, this is looking good.
That's a beautiful combination of the greens and the blue.
Well, I always think of my color schemes, and I have a kind of preconceived idea before I even start. Some people do it haphazardly and just go wax and dip, but I'm planning my thing ahead of time, and sometimes I have preconceived ideas in my mind. I can visualize it finished before I even start, and I work for that.
Well, that's the mind of an artist, then. And that's why you've moved into various other creative adaptations of all the original designs.
Yeah, I have the same idea with the porcelains. I can visualize it finished before I start, and then I just sit down and plan what steps do I need, what colors do I take, how is it fired. Just as with the pisanki, you figure out what colors do you dip into to get the desired effect.
Now here you can see graphically and visually how applying the warmth of the flame melts the wax, like melts away the ice of the winter. It's a participation in that entire change that's happening in nature, and also the light of Jesus' resurrection coming to warm our hearts.
When all the wax is removed, this will be kind of like a floral, lacy pattern on the egg.
Pani Basia, it's your artistic talent that took you much beyond even traditional designs, but you developed the Polish designs in your own little signature takes. Could you show us some of those?
Sure. In 1992, when I did this with the children in school, one of the little girls did a very crude basket with the Spielka, incidentally, Father. We weren't using styluses. So I looked at that basket and I thought, I can certainly do that. And I went home and I did this egg. This was my very first basket done with the stylus, and I tried to get as many colors on as possible, so that's a lot mental planning, too, of not only writing and dipping. This was my very first basket.
It looks like a basket that would be sold in the Rynek, in the town square.
Exactly, and I wanted it to make it, this is what she did with the pinheads, this little block-like design. Mine is finer with the stylus. From then on, it was baskets every year.
And here we have one of your signature design eggs, too, the basket with the lattice work with the daffodils. You want to say something about that one? Or?
That one was done last year, 2000. I did date my baskets. That was 2015, and it's the laciest basket I've done so far. Because it's the type of lacework I also do on porcelain, daffodils were kind of challenged to figure out the colors for the trumpet-shaped daffodils. But I'm also familiar with flowers because I garden and I also paint them on porcelain. So
and you have a sample here of
realistic.
Of a porcelain egg.
Then I tried to do the basket on the porcelain egg, and this one is based on Larry Kozłowski's motifs of Polish egg patterns. And what I did here was adapt the Kraków basket in terms of porcelain materials. Now here you start with the porcelain egg already, and what you do is you add things like yellow luster, green luster inside the leaves, and you flake off the porcelain to give it that rough effect on the basket. This particular thing exactly would have about 3 firings, probably under temperature between 1400 and 1500 Fahrenheit. And once the luster is fired, then the colored enamels are added in the same way we add the wax on the egg, except instead of pin heads, we use the sharp point of the pin and we apply liquid colored enamels.
Okay, you also have a sample here of your mother's style, the pin style, and how you put that on a porcelain as well.
Yeah, this would have been Grandma's style, but instead of using the pinhead, which starts with the dop and then it makes that long tail, when you work with enamels on porcelain, you are applying the enamel with needles like this. So you have a glob of enamel on your pinhead, and you carefully draw it and structure it and get it the way you want it. Then it has to be fired again. The last thing that goes on is the liquid gold. That's 24 karat gold when it's fired. So this is Polish adaptation, Polish motif on a different material. Now babcia's style was done with the pinheads, and I also tried to do the same thing on porcelain. This is tedious, but I love doing it because what I have here is her sunburst design, or słońce, and I use colored lusters, and then to emphasize, incidentally, the egg is mother of pearl. And then after the whole thing was almost finished, I did pen work with the dark blue paint. We liquefied the paint, and I did pen work around all the sunbursts. So we have the same design, the same Polish design in a different material. This would be the traditional szpilka style that Grandma taught me. It's kind of coarse, it's not as fine as what you get with the stylus, but this would be her sunburst design. And I elaborated it with several layers of color. So this is a repeat of the same pattern in a different material. More permanent, more costly, but again, it's a repetition of Polish motifs in a different material.
So you can see here an excellent example how Pani Basia here went from pisanki to porcelain and back to pisanki again.
And I go back and forth all the time, Father.
Wonderful.